Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Sasha.
I'm looking forward for our conversation today. As you know, the listener, our podcast is mostly about tips and inspiring stories for therapists
Mhm.
and coaches to help you in your journey, both in terms of what to do, how to do to grow your private practice, but also to hear from other therapists that know the road ahead and maybe expand kind of the range of possibilities of what's out there and what your journey can include. And Nicole, we connected with you I think on Facebook, and when you mentioned all the things you done, I was okay. This is the perfect person to interview for my podcast. So take it away and maybe say a few words about who you are, who you help, what do you do.
Well, at the core of all of it, I'm a person, but I'm a psychotherapist and I do private practice. And my private practice is with individuals with an existential, psychodynamic, humanistic kind of foundation, really.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to seeing my individual clients, my journey has been with technology. And of course, that's expanded dramatically recently with the pandemic. But I started back with that um, almost a decade ago. So um, long before everyone was Zooming, when there was just Skype
Mm-hmm.
and just texting, I started out with a focus on online therapeutic practice. And that's been a core of my work, which I still see clients online today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you were one of the pioneers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. It's been such a common thing in coaching, right? Just phone calls for decades already, and then video calls, and it's kind of sounds like you were a big, you had a big influence with your projects that you were involved with bringing it into therapy, which allows so many uh, or flexibilities in terms of working with rural areas, for example, that don't
Mhm.
have any therapist around them. Um yeah. Maybe rewind. What do you remember from beginning your private practice? Before we get to the exciting stuff like your involvement with basically one of the founders of talk therapy, right? The
Yeah, Talkspace, the
Talkspace.
I worked with them for years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, people who are listening to this podcast interview and thinking how to start a private practice
Mhm.
and want to learn from what you know. What do you remember about that period, that first year or first half a year?
Yes, it was a little bit of a strange story actually. I was working, I live in St. Augustine Beach, Florida, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a smallish area. It's growing, but at the time it was quite small. And I was working in a community mental health practice, very, and really a lot of people from rural areas would come. And I saw the barriers that people had to getting and maintaining healthcare, mental health care. Really, just to see a therapist was a challenge. So it wasn't very inspiring work. And then, of course, with some funding issues, the place where I worked as an employee went out of business. They had to close suddenly.
Interesting.
And that was really disheartening as an idealist young therapist who wanted
Yep.
to change the world. And then all of a sudden I'm out of a job. And it was so not what I expected or wanted it to be like. And so I found myself with a colleague of mine who also had just lost her job there, sitting on my living room floor, like a couple of days after the place had closed suddenly. And what are we going to do? And of course, those patients that we saw there, we didn't want to abandon them. They suddenly didn't know where to go,
Yep.
and we had done the outpatient portion of that, and so even though we didn't really have much and were frightened, we said, we can rent some office space and let's just roll up our sleeves and get to work,
Mm-hmm.
help many of the people that couldn't be served by this
Mm-hmm.
place anymore, so that we can help them at least somehow and see if we can grow a practice. And so it was really out of necessity that I
Interesting.
started private practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not expecting to take that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it was good. It was good. It was necessary. And around this same time was when I was on Facebook, and it was a little bit before the place actually closed. But I had seen a Facebook post by Dr. Urban Yalom that talked about this new his experience in online therapy through Skype.
Uh-huh.
That somebody was trying to do something more with it, and it was called Talktala at the time. And if any therapists were interested in contacting the founder to get involved, they could. And I did. It was interesting. It was sheer interest that made me pursue it, and also the fact of this previous experience that I saw how many people weren't getting care.
Yes.
And I knew from taking graduate courses online that this was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, why not give it a whirl?
Yeah.
And it was very small. And so as I'm working my private practice and helping here in person locally, I was also helping with that. And of course, it was so early stage. There were only a few people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no money involved at that point. It was sheer just inspiration for wanting to see where something could go and how it could be built, and what problems could be solved.
Yeah, I love that, Nicole. So 2 projects that you started that good things came out of it. The Talkspace, and it was called differently back then, and your private practice. When I talk to counselors, especially before they joined our private practice accelerator, the 6-figure practice program, there is this fear, unless they already have been in private practice for a while, the fear of starting something new. Right? It's and if we look at the business life cycle, just like families have life cycles and humans have, that first initial step, right? The birth, it's around, like, the big thing there is risk and the perception of risk, right? Do I go all in and try this thing out, and do I make it happen, right? Or do I go with whatever feels like the safest option, which like in your case wasn't a safe option, right? I get the a safe job, and then they close out of a sudden. So can you tell me, how were you able to start 2 new projects despite, well, with the private practice, probably some fears around, will it work, right? Or should I go and maybe work at a different agency? And the other thing, getting involved with a new project, I don't know. I assume some counselors might think, when they see a post like this from Dr. Yalom, who am I to even, reach out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the imposter syndrome that can kick in. How did you work with starting something new in both of those cases?
Oh, goodness. I think for myself, I've always been a little bit of an explorer and extremely curious.
Uh-huh.
And so that probably helped me as a kind of resiliency into that. But really, out of just the need of other people, I wasn't really so much thinking about the risks that I had to take.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking initially, when these people wouldn't be served, I worried about them. I worried about others.
I love it.
What are you going to do to help them?
Mm-hmm.
And knowing just that and I think this is true in mental health care, there's just so many people that need help that aren't getting it. You
Hmm.
have a place if you're a therapist. You really do.
I love that.
You can help someone.
Hmm.
How you grow that is up to you because the area is so vast.
Hmm.
There's almost too much possibility that you have to kind of, because as I grew, I had to realize I have to make choices here. And as, businesses grow, they have to kind of know like what populations do they want to work with? Do they want to specialize? How does that look like? And so really I was just propelled by helping other people. I wish I could say that. I mean, maybe the risk, I was a little bit younger, maybe I wouldn't take the same risk today, but
Hmm.
knowing myself, I may just do it,
Yeah.
but it had to inspire me.
Hmm. I love that. So you focused on helping other people versus on your own inner process.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. You
for,
know
for
what?
better,
I'm sorry.
for better or worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, One of my coaches, Takimura, he says, when you get anxious about your business not growing as fast as you want or just not growing, just focus on service, right? And on helping people because that's what it's all about and that's what it's based on. So, uh, you know, mm, I recorded this podcast episode and it had I gave it a slightly provocative title to get slightly more attention, right? It's selfish uh, of you not to start your private practice, just but the
Mhm.
idea there is whether it's private practice or an agency, if you already put in right 3 years as a therapist in training, or even if you're a coach, and there are some really good coaching programs out there, and then, after all this effort and the hundreds of hours in internship, you're deciding to play small, right, and not go and work in the profession. In a way, it's a disservice to all the potential clients you could be helping, and
It is.
it's just a waste, and it's a shame.
Honestly, yes. I mean,
Hmm.
I think everybody needs to find their place of what types of people they work with best
Hmm.
and give them
Exactly.
a purpose. But I think that it is a shame.
Hmm. At least trying, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
for science sake.
For science sake, and at the heart of it, some throughout the course of my life, I've had helpers along the way,
Yes.
and that's such a valuable piece to this is that we're here to help others.
Hmm.
And then in turn, maybe not from the same source, it's given back.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say after starting your private practice and getting involved with Talkspace at the beginning stages of it? Was your next milestone in growing in your profession, in your private practice, in any
And
other projects you
yeah,
got involved with?
yeah. Well, when I worked for Talkspace, I worked as a contractor the whole time. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the way most startups work. Although I was working exclusively with them, and I think the next kind of milestone was feeling almost in the beginning like was a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Like, what right do I have to
Yes.
try to do this?
Hmm.
And then luckily, I ended up working with Dr. Yalom, with her for years. We would have a video conference one
Mm.
for an hour every other week for years,
Hmm.
and he was a wonderful um, colleague and mentor and friend. And that relationship, working relationship, really ended up changing who I am
Hmm.
as a therapist
Yeah.
and my work, and greatly influenced me. And of course, then once the company grew to a certain point, all good things must come to an end, and
Hmm.
I decided to take an exit, and was then started to, because I think it's very important for people who are in private practice to have someone who is a clinical supervisor or anchor,
Yes.
or at least a group that they meet with,
Hmm.
to because as therapists we need that. And you would languish if you were alone. And so I do work with Ruth Ellen Josselson, who Irv works with, but he's very old now and has other projects. So I started
Hmm.
working with her, and then working with other startups and businesses, consulting in the online behavioral health space.
Yeah, I love that. So your relationship with Dr. Yalom was around Talkspace, or was it more supervisor, supervisee, or colleagues?
It was around Talkspace
Uh-huh.
and the development of, if you're going to create a company with this, although online therapy or remote therapy has been done for a long, long time. I mean, if we trace it back, I think Jung had letters he wrote to a patient through snail mail.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course, therapists have kind of grappled with this through the phone and things like that. But if you're going to make it with technology nowadays
Yeah.
and you're going to scale it, you need to make sure that it's done obviously ethically, obviously the highest standard you can.
Yep.
And of course, with technology, one of the good things that's possible is really having more information about outcome measures and how do we even become better therapists with the data and information that we can use.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these areas of like, how do we do it really well?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it like traditional therapy? And, how do we take the kind of techniques and tools and refashion them for this new environment? So we worked on all of those kinds of things with, of course, real case examples that we
Mm-hmm.
would talk about every week.
Yeah, I love that. Were you were you thinking at the time, maybe I'm taking on too much? Well, I have my private practice here that I'm developing, and should I even get involved in another project?
I found the other project so satisfying and inspiring, and so much more opportunity was there. I just kind of naturally got pulled in that
Mm-hmm.
direction,
Yeah,
and so I needed to make a commitment to that.
yeah.
Um, it was really just feel. I didn't think I was taking. I didn't think I was taking on too much. Of course, through the course of it, it went from
Yeah,
like
just a little bit to I,
to
I don't
like
have time to eat lunch.
so yeah, so I mean, you talk about kind of a birth, and it does feel like labor at times. It's very, you can feel the growing of something, and you have to, and then there's kind of a lull, and then you feel another spurt of growth, and then there's a
Yep.
lull, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to learn how to manage those feelings and thoughts, and kind of the sometimes you might have a sense of like, oh, all of this is going to fail horribly, or what am I doing here? But those are just, most of those are based in fear.
Mm-hmm.
And and fear isn't something we necessarily have to give into, is it?
Yeah. That's the definition of courage, right? Taking action despite the fear, not
Yeah,
the absence of.
yeah. I mean, there's always doubt
Mm-hmm.
and fears and insecurities and things like that. And you just have to think about what's realistic.
Mm.
It's usually not your worst fear.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we know this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and easier said than done, right? What would be your advice for therapists that, especially at the beginning of their journey, the professional journey after training, are sometimes paralyzed by fear, right? For example, I see that all the time when therapists join our private practice accelerator. Some of them actually have a pretty decent base for the website, but they're paralyzed by the thought of publishing it and putting it out into the world, right? Or what will happen if? What are your thoughts on specific ways to work with the doubts?
Yeah, I mean, I could see where you say if I put something out in the world, if I publish my website or whatever, what if it looks horrible? What if there's a bug?
Hmm.
And that may very well happen. It happens all the time.
Yep.
And then you fix it.
Sounds very simple. Nicely said, Nicole. And then you fix it.
Yeah, and you
Uh-huh.
fix it. I mean, it's not like you're not going to have stumbling blocks on it on the journey. You absolutely are. You're going to have people telling you that you can't possibly do it, or
Mm.
that. I mean, that's something that we confronted. When online therapy, and I look back at it, and I don't want to have resentment about it, but originally people were saying, "Oh, this is how could you even do this? It wouldn't be effective. It wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not normal because it was innovative, and people have a fear
Yep.
of change.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, through all of the last year, it's when it's the only way you can communicate. Now it's widely accepted,
Yeah. It's
and
the catch 22. People
yeah.
do what they're used to doing just because it was done the same way yesterday.
And so just like we tell our clients, in order for change to happen, you need to get a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though we're therapists, we're not immune to this feeling that I have to do something, or it might be in my best interest to do something, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it doesn't look pretty and it's a little messy.
Yeah.
Um, because the greater thing is that I can then manage it,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
get help, or
Nicely said. Yeah. With time, I learned to recognize that feeling, that little, uh, not anxiety, but hesitation, like the tightness in my stomach and the thoughts of, maybe tomorrow, as a green light. Oh, okay, this is the sign I should go for it.
People
Yeah.
really coil at feelings of anxiety. They really seem to coil at them, or want to push, like, this myth that we could live an anxiety-free life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can really embrace your anxiety like that, I feel like that's what anxiety is really there to do, is to help you to live,
Mm-hmm.
help you to go forward. And so you just have to listen to it very carefully.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's just your body getting ready for action.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Yeah, which is not the worst thing when you're about to take action. Uh, what were your? So we're kind of doing a quick overview of all your professional journey, and we're still at the first year, 2 years of your private practice and getting involved with Talkspace. What would you say were your main challenges and how you overcame them, business-wise as well?
Business wise as well, originally I put too much emphasis on not taking care of little things that would annoy me.
Oh, okay. The operation side.
The
That. Uh-huh.
operation side in my
Mm-hmm.
private practice, and in retrospect, if I could go back in time, I'd change that, but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
This is advice for for other people.
Yeah.
I wish I had taken myself. I wish I had done things like, paid very good attention to my taxes and how I ran my LLC, just very practical stuff. But
Yeah.
that as much.
But it's the boring stuff, right? Why would you focus on that when you can help people, right?
Well, because I now know, because it's very important to do so. So, knowing that you do have to do some of the boring stuff anyway, get through it, is something that I think I struggled with.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're pointing it out because I see that both in therapists who are just starting out or already have even a group practice and they don't have their foundation in place. So in the six-figure practice program, we use this model, a triangle. You have your operations, you have your marketing, and your sales, right? So therapists in private practice, they usually focus just on the marketing part. How do I get found? And they don't, and even that part is not well thought of. They usually count just on one strategy that kind of works randomly versus have a consistent stream of clients that find them. But the sales part is not taken care of because, well, we are therapists, we don't need to sell, right? And the operations part is not taken care of, and then burnout kicks in, right? It's like, oh, I'm spending 20 hours helping clients, so my dream came true and my practice is full, but 10 hours. Additionally, I'm doing the operations part, a lot of manual labor, and kind of trying to keep it all together. That's why, I'll actually share something personal. When I was building our private practice accelerator, I was really thinking about what's the right order for all the models. And like my gut feeling was we need to take care of the operations part in model one, week one. And then I was thinking, well, it's kind of boring and not exciting. I want to get, people who join therapists and coaches get excited, right? And start finding clients as soon as possible. So I had a lot of back and forth with myself, and I did a lot of iterations, and I just decided, no, yeah, it's feels a little bit more boring, but actually, once the operations part is done, a lot of the anxiety is taken care of because you know that when what you wish for comes true, you won't pay the price for it with a lot of manual labor.
Mhm.
So I think I made a good decision with that, and it's great to see therapists who take their business as a business, not as a hobby.
Mhm. Exactly.
Hmm. So,
Strong foundation will serve people later. You know.
mhm. Any other challenges you're thinking of back in the day?
Um, well, I think out of that, it wasn't so much. Well, let me think. Probably as I look over time, one of the challenges was just really being able to be open with clients about the financial aspect of the working alliance and relationship.
Interesting. Say more about that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have trouble talking about money. And
Uh-huh.
you mentioned the sales portion. Why would therapists need to do sales? Well,
Yep.
because they're selling their services, and you're
Yeah.
sales, and they feel like it's a nasty word,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's something wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's people need to know what you're offering, and so I think there's the part of that that's like a marketing piece, that's a larger piece of sales, but then actually speaking with clients about their financial lives
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
something therapists don't do. They
Yeah.
never
They don't go there.
they don't go there. And it's so important because in your own for your client it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So for your own business it's important because it does things like manage dropout rates
Mm-hmm.
of people who they don't want to tell their therapist some aspect of their financial life. They can't afford the fee anymore, so they just would leave or something like that.
Yep.
Whereas the more open you can be with your clients about a financial situation, the more you can have a better outcome and they'll probably stay longer.
Yeah, I love that. And you're modeling that it's okay to talk about money. I literally have clients that would tell me about like a very deep trauma, like first session. Oh, and in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, hold your horses. But they won't talk about money for a year if I don't go there.
Mhm.
Right? It's like a bigger taboo than sex or trauma or anything else. Money.
Yes, it is. And yet it's something that people really struggle with. I mean, we know people who commit suicide, a lot of them do so when they're in financial peril.
Yep.
It's something that needs to be talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Many times I would offer to my client as a resource free financial coaching. That is, for anyone who's listening, it's probably available for you too in as part of the taxes you're paying to your county. Right?
Mhm.
That's usually a service that's offered for free by the county, that's paid by your taxes, would be good for you and would be good for your clients. And it's free, which is kind of awesome. Um, okay, so fast forward, let's say 3 years.
Mhm.
What would you attribute the growth of your private practice to? Maybe some specific things, mindset things. Where were your clients finding you from? Um, how were you able to grow, etc.?
Well, I don't know if the timeline is exactly like you said, but then when I decided to exit working for Talkspace, that had been such a huge project.
Mm-hmm.
I had to admit to myself I was a little burnt out,
Yes.
and I wasn't quite sure exactly what things were going to look like next.
Yeah, that's a tough truth to admit to a therapist, right? It's like, oh, I talk to about burnout all the time with my clients, but look at myself.
Yeah, yeah. You're supposed to be strong for everyone, and
Exactly.
I struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
I am a very strong person.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you can't suffer from burnout a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to take. I kind of fought that feeling. I didn't want to admit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me neither. Same thing.
I didn't want to admit it. And then, but once I did, that was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could give myself a little bit of grace, take a little bit of time,
Mm.
think about what I wanted to focus on next.
I love that. So actually, a part of your growth was de-escalating the growth, right? Kind of
Yes,
slowing down and asking yourself the important questions.
really important questions.
Yeah. Mhm. And what
Yeah.
were your answers that you found?
You know, I think a question was, should I just go out and get some other, what should my career look like now? And,
Uh-huh.
lots of decision making over, things like, well, would I want to move from where I live now? And, because this is not Valley where I live. What is my life going to look like? And should I just really scale down to something and be employed by someone? Should I continue? Should I start getting patients in person again? Because it had been a while since I'd seen in-person patients. And after a lot of reflection, I mean, I found out, to really embrace what I enjoy. And one of the things is I see clients from all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
English speaking, but from different countries. And I really enjoy that work
Mm-hmm.
tremendously. It gives me satisfaction. And so I wanted to embrace that more. I
Mm-hmm.
had one project I was working on that I decided I'm just going to put it on hold. It was a personal project. And I said, I'm just going to put it on hold for a while. I'm just going to let it sit. And I
Mm-hmm.
not beat myself up about it.
Yeah.
And see what happens there. And then I did some projects with some other startups, and they're not always. I had to confront this the fact, that they're not all going to be as successful as each other, because I'm not the only person driving it, of course. But would they be satisfying, and would I be able to help in
Mm.
some meaningful way? And so I kind of grappled with that. And what I really learned is that I enjoy the individual sessions with clients just more than any other part of it. That's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah. Beautiful. Mm. It's interesting. It kind of flips, right? At the beginning, when you're just starting out, your goal, in a way, is to say yes to everything, right? Okay, I'm gonna try this thing, gonna try this thing. But the more you grow, the more successful you become, whatever success means to you, you start, it's kind of like your responsibility. My responsibility is to start saying yes. Say no to more and more projects, potential clients, whatever. So I need to be really, really clear on my priorities. And sounds like your main priority was, well, what do I actually enjoy the most? Kind of as
Yeah,
simple as that.
is very much. There's a lot of truth in what you're saying, because I am definitely a yes person, and I think a lot of therapists and helpers,
Of course.
they want to say yes because they want to help people, but you
Exactly.
have to have this. There does come a time when you really have to use your nose wisely.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a little bit challenging for
Mm.
me. And yet it is a marker of some success to
Yeah,
be,
it is. It's a quality problem to have, right? I see that with, after a few months to a year, the therapists in our and coaches in our program, they fill their practices, right? Whatever full it means to them. Usually, it's 20 to 30 clients a week, and then they have a high quality problem. Well, where do I go from here? And I think it's a wonderful next stage in your development, which usually involves either some group work or scaling down, setting like very clear non-negotiable boundaries. Okay, more than for myself, for example, no more than 20 hours a week of private practice, just nothing more than that. um, or online products, or doing some consulting work. Like you got involved with a lot of projects, and or hiring a team, or hiring or creating a group practice. And it's interesting. Usually, it's the things that got therapists to that. Let's say, for the sake of measuring it, let's say 100K a year revenue, just as a way to measure it. What got them there is usually what's going to stop them from getting to the next level, whatever their next level is, right? Which is trying to do everything on your own, right?
Mhm.
Saying yes to everything and just counting on yourself to do it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think about that?
I can completely agree with that. And I see that clearly in business that yes, yes, yes. And it is like it's building. You can feel the pressure. And you have to switch something.
Mm-hmm.
There is this time when it seems like you've grown and now it seems like it's falling. It could seem like it's
Mm-hmm.
falling apart or it's going to come off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily.
Exactly.
Not necessarily. Not
Unless you keep on doing the same thing,
yeah,
and then
it's
it might.
the same thing. And then you just have to really think clearly then. And you have to realize that it's a good problem.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Just the opposite. You actually did some
You're
really good work.
doing something right, but
Uh-huh.
what it's going to look like now, because it can't, it's going to evolve at some point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to stay just by the nature of the business. It's not going to stay stagnant like that. It's a moving thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make those decisions. And I mean, obviously, hiring someone and making a group practice is very different than some other avenue you may take, like doing group work.
Yep.
So you really have to be thoughtful about what do you want your life to look like?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want your working life to look like? And those bigger questions of, well, really, how do I define success?
Mm-hmm.
Success making then even more money, or is it being content with what I have and just keep, being content with what I have and what I do and scaling back a little bit and maintaining?
Yeah, that's a great question. And how do you know? What would be your advice for therapists that maybe suffer from the dichotomy of I either help people or I either charge for my services? And sometimes, neglect that part of their business. Not necessarily, doing just pro bono, but maybe being underpaid, right? Or not taking care of, charging people up front, or not upholding their boundaries with late cancellations, like 1 hour before the session.
It's really helping people. It's really helping your clients to have these conversations and for them to value you. Um, there's lessons there about how we value each other, and it's just so critical to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Our client, our clients themselves have a lot of concerns often,
Yep.
boundaries in their own life, and so if you look at it from a point of view that you're really modeling good behavior for them,
Mm.
then it creates a sense of security in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and it ends up being more. I know the fear is there, but it ends up being more manageable when
Mm-hmm.
you bring it to light.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really, and not the harsh realities of life is that not everyone can afford, um, you know, $100, $200 an hour for a therapist. That may be
Mm-hmm.
true, and that people's financial situations change. But also, I don't know how many times I've seen this story where, you have a client that's complaining about your fee, which is rather low, let's
Uh-huh.
say, and they're complaining about it. And then in the next session, they're talking about, I went on this vacation somewhere, or I went
Yep.
to a restaurant. And
Mm-hmm.
as a therapist, you hear that, and you can't help but think to yourself, well, if they can afford all of these other things, what is
Mm-hmm.
this that they can't? Is it not value? And then you have to look into yourself and say, well, how valuable is my service?
Good point.
What
Mm-hmm.
they get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people will pay, I don't know, it depends, a lot of money to get their hair or nails done quite often. And it's a gym membership is something to look at. I mean, people pay for services, for personal services all the time.
Yes.
And it really strikes me that therapists don't value their personal
Mm.
service more when they are also legitimate healthcare providers.
Exactly right. So what's that about?
I wish I knew what it was about. I think,
Mm.
for myself, when I remember I went in, I interned at the hospital. Oops, sorry.
No worries.
I went for me, what it's about is I could recall going into the hospital where I worked as an intern.
Uh-huh.
And this was before I graduated with my master's. And I did a year internship in a hospital.
Yep.
And for free, right? I didn't get paid for the internship, and I actually paid for supervision. So I'm paying
Yep.
to.
Yeah,
I'm paying,
I paid for my internship too.
and I loved it. I
Uh-huh.
absolutely loved every moment of it. It taught me. It was satisfying, but it also sent some kind of a message. I remember talking to my supervisor and him saying, "You don't get into this profession for the money."
Oh yeah. That's a dangerous message.
And it was a really dangerous message.
It's not like it's I would be scared if that would be the only reason that someone goes into being therapist, just the money, right? But
Mhm.
like pushing this idea away that you need to be paid for your time and effort, that's kind of ridiculous, especially usually when putting 100K into 3 years of education plus living expenses plus the sunk cost of not working full time for those 3 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Yo.
a this message. And, for therapists that feel, I don't know, I guess weird about charging, I don't know why you would. I mean, you're a professional, but, I have often said to my clients, because it's a caring profession, you have a relationship with someone. So if you're a good therapist, you really do care. But and I'm sure other people have heard this before, they're not necessarily paying for your caring, they're paying for your time. And you're taking an hour out of your day or however long your sessions are, and it's the time they're paying for.
And usually they're paying for years, not even an hour, right? Within
Yeah.
that hour, you're using skills and experience um, that you've been acquiring for years.
Yes, absolutely. And your fee should be reflective of that.
hmm Yeah. So let's fast forward to today. What are the projects you're involved with today, or are you doing just one-on-one therapy? How does your week look like?
Um, well, I'm fielding offers. I've got some meetings set up recently with some other startups.
Uh-huh.
Talk about consulting projects, and those usually, they're not long-term things. They usually help in one
Yeah,
area.
that's exciting. You get in, you get out.
Yeah, I get in, I get out, and that's nice because I can manage it. I set a little bit of time aside for that, and then the rest of it right now is individual one-on-one clients. So
hmm
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah.
But I think in the future, I know it's going to look different in the future.
hmm
Um, I'm focusing. A project I did put aside for a while was writing, and I'm doing that now.
Oh,
And
beautiful. You're writing your book?
yeah, but it was a long journey. It's a terrible thing.
Writing a book. Yeah.
Terrible, horrible, heartachy.
Yeah. Why would people do that?
Why would anyone do that to
Yeah.
themselves?
I have two books like ready, like one is edited and one is like I'm going over the last edit, and it's like just putting the period on it and getting it published already.
And I've had friends, it's nice to have writer friends because like, they may submit a manuscript and then it doesn't get published or something like that, and you realize you're not alone. So I mean that is
Mm-hmm.
something where it really is a joy.
Yeah. What is your book about? I'm curious.
Therapy. Therapy, of course.
Yeah, that's a good subject for a therapist to write about.
But it's something I worked on for a long time, and I really did just have to put it away for a while
Yeah.
because um, it just didn't suit me to. That was actually when you talked about that question of like, what do I do next?
Yes.
That was one of my things I had to say, not a yes or a no. I had to say not yet, just
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to give up on it, but I also knew that right now other things took precedent in my life.
Yeah.
And people have families other than just your work.
Mm-hmm.
You have your families, you have your other interests and things, and therapists have to know how to, like, you can't just work all the time. You have to have a balanced life in order to
Mm-hmm.
make a long career.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so different that like having a shelf for things that are just not a priority right now versus not finishing your website, same example, because you get scared a little bit, right? Very different things, right? By decision or by impulse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And over the years I'll do little things like I keep a paper calendar,
Mm-hmm.
weekly day minder,
Yep.
and I've kept one for every year, and I can go back and I can reflect and see what kind of things look like. Same thing with like your tax records, or you can go back over time, sometimes like a diary, and look back and see your growth over time and how you made those decisions, or if they
Mm-hmm.
were impulsive.
I love it. What would be your advice for a therapist or even a coach who's thinking how to start a private practice?
What would be my advice for someone is how to start a private practice. Well, I mean, obviously you help people with that, and I I think just initially doing the research,
Mm-hmm.
but not doing too much research. You could get lost
Oh,
just
good point.
Googling, and with all the types of choices you have to make, it can be very overwhelming. And I would say make a choice and carry it out, and don't question it all the time. If
Mm-hmm.
it's not a good choice, guess what? You get to make more choices.
Mm-hmm.
But to kind of stay stagnant, wondering if I should or if I shouldn't. If I should, that is like the worst.
Yeah. And I'm a couples therapist. I see that as the biggest problem with couples when they're on the fence. Should I stay or should I leave, right? And then they're not invested in their relationship and they're not living either, right? So it's this limbo that creates suffering, really.
It really is. It's a purgatory. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you made the worst choice,
Mm-hmm.
it would lead you in a direction, and you could make an,
Yes.
or you could repair, you could do something. But
Mm.
just to sit in that what should I do mode next
Mm-hmm.
it is a true purgatory.
Yeah, I love that. It's the danger of the illusion that planning equals execution, right? It's not. When you're planning and researching, you're not doing. Even if you're spending hours and hours reading articles, it doesn't get you like even one step closer to your private practice. I love what you said about like do some initial research, but it's just like one small step to start with and then just start doing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It has to be that way. And just starting somewhere, because
Yeah.
should I start with marketing? Should I start with, some sort of sales, or should I do something in the
Hmm.
right direction? If you're moving in the right direction, you're moving.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting. I don't know if it's related, but yesterday I heard just like some different inspirational, talks about starting your business, and Dana White, who's kind of the owner of UFC, mixed martial arts, like some, yeah, brutal sport, right? He was using the same words that you just used, right? Just start, do something, fail, continue, right? So it's interesting, right? The same thing works for therapy private practice as it works for, mixed martial arts, fighting in a ring. Just do something, learn from it, and continue. Well, Nicole, what would be your tip for someone who already filled their practice and they're thinking, well, where do I go from here? I kind of achieved what I wanted to at the beginning. I have more than enough clients. I know that I have incoming stream of clients constantly, but should I just keep at it, or should I start something new? What would be your advice for that stage?
Hmm. I think my advice might depend on the person, because once you get that geared up feeling of growing, some people will just keep going full blast,
Uh huh.
and just and that can get a little hairy. I think for for someone who's already grown their practice, I think at some point they need to stop and ask themselves that question about success and what that really means to them.
Yes.
I think one thing that's a tool that sometimes I use is to, when I think of my career, I used to make decisions about, like, well, what do I do in the short? I had more short term thinking as to how to get through the next year or whatever. I think looking and saying, well, 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
what do I expect this to be like?
Mm-hmm.
20 years from now, do I ever want to retire? I mean, personally, I don't,
Yeah.
but
Who wants that?
I
Yeah.
really don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people do want to
Hmm.
retire, or, that I think looking at these, at both the short and long term, when you're thinking about growing to the next stage, where do you want to be? As opposed, I mean, because when you're just building at the beginning,
Hmm.
are pretty clear. You set your foundation, and you just need to build, get clients, or, like,
Yeah.
it's clear. When you get to that stage where, what do I do next?
Hmm.
I think you do have to look at the bigger picture, the long term, what you want your life to look like.
Yeah. Nicely said. Nicole, thank you so much for this interview. Very inspiring. If anyone who listens or watches this interview wants to contact you, either they want to hire you as a consultant or ask you questions, how do they find you and how do they contact you?
Well, right now, since I'm very quiet,
Uh-huh.
uh, you can find me on LinkedIn or via my email address,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if you put it in the
So it would be on the pod as a podcast episodes, which is also, so some people would be just listening to it. So if you can spell how they find you, that would be awesome.
Nicole, Amesbury, Amesbury @gmail.com. That is
Could you
the,
repeat that again? I think it was cut out for a second.
it's DNICOLEAMESBURY @gmail.com. So,
Wonderful.
and my name, Nicole Amesbury @gmail. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much too. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, me too.